This story is called The Wife of Nearly 29 Years, Was Caught Cheating in a Restaurant. Yes, it's true, my wife was cheating on me in a restaurant owned by a friend of mine, and she was cheating with him. I am 50 years old, my wife is 49. Our children have grown up and have their own families. This man she was cheating with is successful. He owns a couple of restaurants. He was like a second father to my kids. When I was not there, he was there. I found out that my wife was supposed to be at work that day, and by chance a colleague of mine whom my wife does not know sent me a message saying that it seemed like my wife was flirting heavily with a man. My wife had never met this colleague. I just showed him a picture of her one day at work, and he remembered what she looked like. He happened to be in the same restaurant. He sent me a photo, and actually she was at the restaurant when she was supposed to be at work, but my friend was the one she was laughing and joking with, so I thought they were just chatting. Nothing in the evening. He's a longtime family friend, so I didn't think much of it. I was working out of town that week, and I was coming home early to surprise my wife and take her out for lunch. My wife usually calls or texts me when she's on her way home from work, but she didn't that day. I arrived home around 11:30 and parked in the driveway. As I approached the door, I heard laughter coming from inside the house. When I opened the door, I saw them, my wife and my friend, laughing and talking. I didn't have a good feeling because it was almost midnight, even though he's a longtime friend, because he's alone with my wife. I asked my wife what she was doing there, and she said he just came to talk. Right, I thought, but I didn't say anything. But I didn't go in behind me, and she asks if I'm okay. I told her I didn't like how the situation looked, a man coming to a woman's house at midnight when her husband isn't home. I told her I was going to bed, and I went upstairs and went to bed. The next morning I asked her again what she was doing there so late at night. She said the same thing. I said okay, and I let the matter drop. I'm pretty sure they were having an affair. I asked her why she thought her husband was having an affair with my wife. She said she thinks they're together too often, and that he always talks about her. I told her I would talk to my wife about it, and she replied that maybe I should think twice, because if my wife was cheating on me, she wouldn't admit it after talking to my friend's wife. I pulled out my phone in front of her. I called him and asked him openly if he was sleeping with my wife. He said no, that he wasn't sleeping with my wife. He said, "You're my friend, my best friend. I would never do such a thing to you. I love you, buddy." I said okay, I believe you, but I'll ask her anyway. I asked my wife that night, and she denied it. She said she wasn't sleeping with him, that he was like an older brother to her, and that she would never do such a thing to me for some reason. After talking to my friend's wife, and even after her husband said he wasn't doing anything with my wife, I still didn't believe him. His wife had already planted the seed in my brain that there was probably something between my wife and her husband. So a few weeks passed, and I noticed my wife was becoming a bit distant. It was a red flag for me, so I decided to put a GPS tracker on her car, just to have some peace of mind. A few days passed, and I saw that my wife's car wasn't moving. It was parked in dialect, and it was 8 in the evening, so I managed to see what she was doing. She was in dialect, talking on the phone. I asked her who she was talking to, and she said a friend. I asked which friend, and she said a girlfriend. I said okay. At that moment, she seemed very suspicious, talking on the phone outside with a so-called friend. A few minutes after she went back inside the house, I decided to look at the GPS app on my phone, and it showed that she had gone to work and come back, and that was it for that day. I thought to myself, if she was talking to a friend, at least she would have gone out and done something, but she didn't. The next day, I looked at the tracking app again, same thing. She went to work and came back, no stops in between. A few days later, I came home from work early and noticed that my wife's car wasn't in dialect. It was around 3 in the afternoon, so I decided to check the tracking app again. The app showed that she was at the restaurant, so I decided to go to the restaurant, but just to see if I could see anything, I didn't go in. I walked past the restaurant, and I saw my wife's car, and I also saw her sitting in a booth with our good friend holding hands at the table. I was curious. I was so angry. I wanted to confront her there and then, but I didn't. I went back home and waited for her. She finally came back around 9 in the evening. I asked her where she had been, and she said she was at work right there, and at that moment I knew she was lying. Then I asked her how her day was, and she said it was good. After chatting, I decided to hire a private investigator for a while. The next day, I met the private investigator and told him what I wanted. He said it would be a bit expensive. I said I didn't care about it. After hiring the private investigator, I had to think about what assets we had, what would happen with the house and the cars. Later that day, I called my son and daughter and asked them to meet me, and I told them it was urgent. They both arrived within an hour. What I exposed to them made them angry. My daughter started crying. I told her that I had hired a private investigator, so we would have to wait and see. My daughter is 23 years old and my son is 21. My son said, "Dad, are you sure?" I told them both that our Friend's wife suspects he's sleeping with your mother. They both said they would keep an eye on her and let me know if they saw anything. A few days passed and I received a call from the private investigator. He said, I have some bad news. I asked what it was. He said he had followed my wife and she had met our friend. Imagine that at a hotel that had footage of everything, even of them entering the hotel holding hands and kissing. They had driven for 30 minutes to try to hide it. I was so angry. I wanted to confront her there and then, but I had to wait. I had to think about what I would do. The next day my wife went to work as usual and I decided to call our friend's wife. She answered on the first ring. I asked her how she was and she said I'm fine. I asked her if her husband was home and she said no, he's at work. After a few minutes of chatting I finally got to the point and told her that I knew about the affair and that I had evidence. I told her I would prepare them in a few days and give them to her. Then I called my children and told them to meet me again. We met later that evening in a local park. I showed my son and daughter what the private investigator had gathered. They both had tears in their eyes. My son said, I can't believe it. My daughter said, I knew there was something. Then I asked them what they wanted to do about it. My son said, we should confront them and put an end to everything. My daughter said to do nothing and let them continue doing what they were doing. I looked at my daughter and asked why she wanted her mother to continue the relationship. She said it would solidify the divorce. My daughter wanted the evidence to be strong against her mother. I asked my son, and he said the same thing, to make sure the private investigator gathers more evidence and then file for divorce. I was shocked that my children would say such things. I thought they would want their mother to end the relationship and sort things out, but they both said it was a major betrayal and that they couldn't forgive their mother for taking such a path and betraying with a longtime friend. They said she was just selfish. I told my children that I would reflect on what they had said and get back to them. The next day, I met with the private investigator again and asked him to get more evidence, and he agreed, saying he would continue until I told him to stop. A few weeks passed and the private investigator had some damning pictures of them at the hotel 30 minutes away, and they were playing in the pool. I told the private investigator to compile it and send it. I received the pictures and called my lawyer Egidio. I told him what was going on. She asked me if I wanted to file for divorce. I told her no, not yet. Then I brought the images to my children. We all stood there in silence, watching their mother and our friend playing in the pool. We all looked at each other with disgust in our eyes, and we knew it was time to ask for a divorce. My daughter and son told me not to say anything to her, to continue doing what I needed to do in secret and let her think she was getting away with it. I told them I would follow their advice, and that's exactly what I did. A month passed, and I pretended that everything was fine. I pretended not to know anything, and we continued with our daily lives. I started planning my departure. All I had to worry about was what assets she would get if she got any in the divorce. In my state, New Hampshire, infidelity can affect the outcome of the divorce, so I had to act quickly to protect myself and my assets. One day, I told my wife that I would be going to a business conference for the day, when in reality, I was meeting with my lawyer to start divorce proceedings. When I came home from work, I told her I had this conference to attend for a few hours and that I would be back home later. She said okay. I met with my lawyer and told him what I wanted. He asked if I was sure about this, and I said absolutely. Then I called the private investigator and told him to send me everything he had on her, which he did. I called my son and daughter and asked them to meet me at home, and we would all confront their mother. My wife came home, saw us all, and had a big smile on her face. My children didn't smile back. They knew what their mother had done. I asked her to sit down, and we all just looked at her. Then I told her I had asked for a divorce, and that's why. I then pulled out my laptop and showed her the pictures of her and our friend at the hotel in the pool. She had no words. She just looked down at the ground with a look of shame on her face. I told her I would put the house up for sale next month. Then I told her to leave. She tried to say she had nowhere to go, but our son and daughter just looked at her silently, and then our son said she could always go live with him, pointing to a picture of our friend. She left that night, and in the weeks that followed, she would come back occasionally to get her things. Our children refused to see her. They were disgusted by her. Several months later, the house was sold. I waited for the divorce to be finalized before I started looking for another house. When the house was sold, I moved in with my daughter until I could find a house. At the divorce hearing, my ex-wife did not oppose it. My lawyer showed the evidence the private investigator had gathered, and she didn't get anything. She earned well, managing 2-car rental facilities. After the divorce was finalized, I bought another house, and my children helped me move in. My children said they hadn't seen or spoken to their mother since that night we caught her. As for my friend, we don't see or talk to him anymore. His wife divorced him, and he has to pay her alimony for 8 years or until she remarries. They were married for a long time. The most incredible thing that happened in this horrible ordeal is how my children handled it. They were my rocks, and I am so proud of them for how they handled it. I never would have thought in a million years that this would happen to me, but it did, and I am a better person because of it. Thank you to each and every one of you strangers on the internet for giving me good advice. I appreciate your time sincerely. If you liked this story, please like, comment, and consider subscribing to the channel for more content. I genuinely appreciate your time.